I'm hoping that you will have another Post-it note for book 3, because that's what I'm going to get ready to read you. That just reminds you what you're looking for. What does the culture value on Pylos? How do we know? How do we know? Because of their actions, the people's actions, their thoughts, and their speech. And that tells us what the culture looks like and what they think about the gods and the authorities, like the kings and the princes, the guests, and feasting. Okay, I'm going to be reading book 3, The Lord of the Western Approaches. Just prior to book 1, remember this little map, Homer's World? If you want to take a look at that, you can see that from Ithaca, Telemachus is going to take a ship down to Pylos, down there. And then eventually in book 4, he will head over to Sparta. Probably can't see because of these little guys. But here we go. Pylos is right there, a coastal town. So when they pull up their ships, they'll go right on to the beach. Okay, so you can see that distance there from Ithaca to Pylos. Alrighty, so here we go. It says the title of the chapter of the book is The Lord of the Western Approaches. So he's coming from the west, Telemachus is, and it's a great title because he is now the Lord of the Western Approaches. Okay, here's the intro, page 35. The sun rose on the flawless brimming sea into a sky all brazen, all one brightening for gods immortal and for mortal men on plowlands kind with grain. And facing sunrise, the voyagers now lay off Pylos town, compact stronghold of Neleus. Neleus is the former king and the father, and then Nestor is going to be a son. On the shore, now listen to this, we have not seen this yet in Ithaca. On the shore, black bulls were being offered by the people to the blue-maned god who makes the islands tremble. So if we stop right there, the blue-maned god is Poseidon. And remember, at the very beginning in book 1, he was on his way striding across the ocean to the sunburnt races who were offering sacrifices to him. So now, here we have right there on the beach. Now, how many black bulls were being offered? 9 congregations, each 500 strong. So it's like 450. Led out 9 bulls apiece. So 450 people are bringing out 9 bulls for each congregation. I think that's like 81 bulls to sacrifice, taking the tripes to eat while on their, in other words, they took the tripes to eat for themselves while on their altars, thigh bones and fat lay burning for the god. Here they put in, they meaning Telemachus and his group, furled sail and beached the ship. Okay, but Telemachus hung back in disembarking. Okay, he puts the ship in, and then he steps back. So that Athena turned and said, and remember now, Athena is a companion. Not the least shyness now, Telemachus. You came across the open sea for this, to find out where the great earth hides your father and what the doom was that he came upon. So this is the whole point of you being here. Go to old Nestor, master charioteer, so we may broach the storehouse of his mind. Ask him with courtesy, and in his wisdom he will tell you history and no lies. But clear-headed Telemachus replied, Mentor, how can I do it? How approach him? I have no practice in elaborate speeches, and for a young man to interrogate an old man seems disrespectful. We can see that Telemachus is starting to just shy away just a little bit. I mean, imagine coming onto a beach with all of this happening. So first of all, the one thing that we know is culturally, they certainly honor and worship the gods. So it's definitely as far as being an honorable Greek society, we can see that here on this, on Pylos. But the gray-eyed goddess said, because remember she is disguised as Mentor, reason and heart will give you words, Telemachus, and a spirit will counsel others. I should say the gods were never indifferent to your life. She went on quickly, and he followed her to where the men of Pylos had their altars. Nestor appeared enthroned among his sons. So there's the father enthroned among his sons, the other princes, while friends around them skewered the red beef or held it scorching, like a little barbecue. When they saw the strangers, a hail went up, and all that crowd came forward, calling out invitations to the feast. So we see, look at this, all these men are like, hey, come on, join us in our feast. Did that even happen when Athena showed up at the hall at the manor in Ithaca? Were the men attentive to any guest coming except for Telemachus? No. So now we see this really beautiful Xenia taking place. Pisistratus in the lead, the young prince, caught up their hands in his and gave them places. So they're shaking hands on curly lambskins flat on the sea sand near Thrasymedes, his brother, and his father. He passed them bits of the food of sacrifice, and pouring wine in a golden cup, he said to Pallas Athena, daughter of Zeus, "Friend, I must ask you to invoke Poseidon." So he hands the cup of prayer to Athena to pray to Poseidon. Isn't that funny? "You find us at this feast, kept in his honor. Make the appointed offering then, and pray, and give the honeyed wine cup to your friend, so he may do the same. He too must pray to the gods on whom all men depend, but he is just my age, since you are the senior. So here I give the goblet first to you." And he put the cup of sweet wine in her hand. Athena liked his manners. Now, again, if we pause here for just a second, no one was offering any prayers of thanks to the gods back on Ithaca. So again, in this culture, look at the high regard and respect they have. And the equity that gave her precedence with the cup of gold, so she besought Poseidon at some length. "Earthshaker, listen and be well disposed. Grant your petitioners everything they ask. Above all, honor to Nestor and his sons. Second, to every man of Pylos town, a fair gift in exchange for this hecatomb," which is the offering. "Third, may Telemachus and I perform the errand on which last night we put to sea." So they can be like, ooh, what errand was that? This was the prayer of Athena, granted in every particular by herself. She passed the beautiful wine cup to Telemachus, who tipped the wine and prayed as she had done. Meanwhile, the spits were taken off the fire, portions of crisp meat for all. They feasted, and when they had eaten and drunk their fill, at last they heard from Nestor, prince of charioteers. "Now is the time," he said, "for a few questions." So one of the things to remember is that proper Xenia comes after you feed your guests. It's typically after you feed and bathe your guests, but in this case, they're out on the beach. So that you don't show any partiality. Now look at this, for a few questions. "Now that our young guests have enjoyed their dinner, who are you strangers? Where are you sailing from? And where to down the highways of seawater? Have you business here, or are you now reckless wanderers of the sea, like those corsairs who risk their lives to prey on other men? Are you pirates? Who are you?" Clear-headed Telemachus responded cheerfully, for Athena gave him heart. By her design, his quest for news about his father's wandering would bring him fame in the world's eyes. So she is set on giving him his own reputation apart from Odysseus's and establishing him with his own renown. So he said, "Nestor, pride of Achaeans, Neleus' son, you ask where we are from, and I can tell you. Our home port is under Mount Neon, Ithaca. We are not here on Ithacan business, though, but on my own. I want news of my father Odysseus, known for his great heart, and I will comb the wide world for it." Look at that. My father Odysseus. Remember in book 1, he could barely get the words out. He who they say is my father, or that's what I hear, that he's my father. But now look at this. I want news of my father Odysseus. Such a difference. "People say he fought along with you when Troy was taken. As to the other men who fought that war, we know where each one died and how he died. But Zeus allotted my father death and mystery. No one can say for sure where he was killed, whether some hostile landsman or the sea. The storm waves on the deep sea got the best of him. And this is why I come to you for help. Tell me of his death, sir, if perhaps you witnessed it, or have heard some wanderer tell the tale. The man was born for trouble. Spare me no part of it for kindness' sake, but put the scene before me as you saw it. If ever Odysseus, my noble father, don't you love that, served you by promise kept or work accomplished in the land of Troy, where you Achaeans suffered, recall those things for me the way they were. He is not sheepishly, in some immature, boyish way, asking for information. He's acting like a prince. Then Nestor, prince of charioteers, made answer, Dear friend, you take me back to all the trouble we went through in that country, we Achaeans. Rough days aboard ship on the cloudy sea, cruising away for pillage after Achilles. Rough days of battle around Priam's town. Our losses then, so many good men gone. Ares, great Aias lies there, Achilles lies there, Patroclus too, the wonderful counselor, and my own strong and princely son, Antilochus, fastest men of them all and a born fighter. Other miseries and many we endured there. Could any mortal man tell the whole story? Not if you stayed 5 years or 6 to hear how hard it was for the flower of the Achaeans. You'd go home weary, and the tale still untold. Think, we were there 9 years, and we tried everything, all stratagems against them, up to the bitter end that Zeus begrudged us. And as to stratagems, no man would claim Odysseus's gift for those. He had no rivals, your father, at the tricks of war. Your father? Well, I must say I marvel at the sight of you. Your manner of speech couldn't be more like his, one would say. No boy could speak so well. And all that time at Ilion, he and I were never at odds in council or assembly. We saw things the same way, had one mind between us in all the good advice we gave the Argives. But when we plundered Priam's town and tower and took to the ships, God scattered the Achaeans. He had a mind to make homecoming hard for them, seeing they would not think straight nor behave, or some would not. So evil days came on them, and she who had been angered, Zeus's dangerous gray-eyed daughter, did it, starting a fight between the sons of Atreus. Isn't that funny? Athena is sitting right there, and he's talking about this fight that she started between the sons of Atreus, which would have been Agamemnon and Menelaus, I believe. First, they were fools enough to call assembly at sundown, unheard of hour. The Achaean soldiers turned out, soaked with wine, to hear talk about it from their commanders. Menelaus harangued them to get organized. Time to ride home on the sea's broad back, he said. But Agamemnon wouldn't hear of it. He wanted to hold the troops. He wanted to make a sacrifice, a hecatomb, like what they were offering there on the beach. Something to pacify Athena's rage. Folly again to think that he could move her. Will you change the will of the everlasting gods in a night or a day's time? The two men stood there hammering at each other until the army got to its feet with a roar and no decision, wanting it both ways. That night no one slept well, everyone cursing someone else. Here was the bane from Zeus. At dawn we dragged our ships to the lordly water, stored aboard all our plunder and the slave women in their low hip girdles. But half the army elected to stay behind with Agamemnon as their corps commander. The other half embarked and pulled away. We made good time, the huge sea smoothed before us, and held our rights when we reached Tenedos, being wild for home. But Zeus, not willing yet, now cruelly set us at odds a second time, and one lot turned, put back in the rolling ships under the command of the subtle captain Odysseus. Their notion was to please Lord Agamemnon. Not I. I fled with every ship I had. I knew fate had some devilment brew there. Diomedes roused his company and fled too, and later Menelaus, the red-haired captain, caught up with us at Lesbos while we mulled over the long sea route, unsure whether to lay our course northward of Chios, keeping the Isle of Pisiria off to port, or inside Chios, coasting by windy Mimas. We asked for a sign from heaven, and the sign came, to cut across the open sea to Euboea, and lose no time, putting our ills behind us. The wind freshened astern, and the ships ran before the wind on paths of the deep sea, making Gerestus before dawn. We thanked Poseidon with many a charred thigh bone for that crossing. On the fourth day, Diomedes' company under full sail put in at Argos port, and I held on for Pylos. The fair wind, once heaven set it blowing, never failed. So this dear child was how I came from Troy. Look at that beautiful, long story with all the details. Really helpful just to hear about Odysseus, to hear about some of the other members, to see Agamemnon wanting to stay behind, to offer sacrifices to Athena so she wouldn't get upset, and Menelaus saying no, he was going to leave right away. So this dear child was how I came from Troy, and saw no more of the others, lost or saved. But you are welcome to all I've heard since then at home. I have no reason to keep it from you. The Myrmidon spear fighters returned, they say, under the son of lion-hearted Achilles. That would have been Neoptolemus, also called Pyrrhus. And so did Poeas' great son Philoctetes. Idomeneus brought his company back to Crete. The sea took not a man from him of all who lived for the long war. And even as far as Ithaca, you've heard of Agamemnon, how he came home. Here's the story, how Aegisthus waited to destroy him, but paid a bitter price for it in the end. So everyone knows that story. That is a good thing now for a man to leave a son behind him, like the son who punished Aegisthus for the murder of his great father. You two are tall and well set up, I see. That's what Athena said to him. Be brave, you two, so men in times to come will speak well of you. We keep hearing that. Then Telemachus said, Nestor, pride of Achaeans, Neleus' son, that was revenge, and far and wide the Achaeans will tell the tale in song for generations. I wish the gods would buckle his arms on me. I'd be revenged for outrage on my insidious and brazen enemies. But no such happy lot was given to me or my father. Still I must hold fast. To this Lord Nestor of Gerenia said, My dear young friend, now that you speak of it, I heard a crowd of suitors for your mother lives with you, uninvited, making trouble. So news did travel around that area. Now tell me how you take this. Do the people side against you, hearkening to some oracle? Who knows, your father might come home someday alone or backed by troops and have it out with them. If gray-eyed Athena loved you the way she did Odysseus in the old days in Troy country, where we all went through so much, never have I seen the gods help any man as openly as Athena did your father. Well, as I say, if she cared for you that way, there would be those to quit this marriage game. But prudently Telemachus replied, I can't think what you say will ever happen, sir. It is a dazzling hope, but not for me. It could not be, even if the gods willed it. At this, gray-eyed Athena broke in, remember she's still disguised as Mentor, saying, What strange talk you permit yourself, Telemachus. A god could save the man by simply wishing it from the farthest shore in the world. Now remember, if we go back, Telemachus said, because responding to Nestor was saying how openly Athena loved your father, and said, well, as I say, if she cared for you that way, okay? But he says, I can't think what you say will ever happen, sir. It is a dazzling hope, but not for me. It could not be, even if the gods willed it. In other words, there's no way Athena could be on my side or for me the way she was for my father. So, top of 42. At this, gray-eyed Athena broke in, saying, What strange talk you permit yourself, Telemachus. A god could save the man by simply wishing it from the farthest shore in the world. If I were here, I should prefer to suffer years at sea and then be safe at home, better than a knife at my heart's side, where Agamemnon found it, killed by adulterers. Though, as for death, of course, all men must suffer it. The gods may love a man, but they can't help him when cold death comes to lay him on his bier. That's that funeral pyre. Telemachus replied, Mentor, grievously though we miss my father, why go on as if that homecoming could happen? You know the gods had settled it already years ago, when dark death came for him. But there is something else I imagine Nestor can tell us, knowing as he does the ways of men. They say his rule goes back over 3 generations, so long, so old, it seems death cannot touch him. Nestor, Neleus' son, true sage, say, how did the lord of the great plains, Agamemnon, die? What was the trick Aegisthus used to kill the better man? And Menelaus, where was he? Not at Argos in Achaia, but blown off course, held up in some far country. Is that what gave the killer nerve to strike? Okay, look at this. Now that this is a land of storytelling, and that's another thing that they value as a culture when they're talking to guests, is the sharing of stories. Something that, stories always invite people in. So here is Telemachus wanting to know more details. Lord Nestor of Gerenia made answer, well, now, my son, I'll tell you the whole story. You know yourself what would have come to pass if red-haired Menelaus back from Troy had caught Aegisthus in that house alive. There would have been no burial mound for him, but dogs and carrion birds to huddle on him in the fields beyond the wall, and not a soul bewailing him for the great wrong he committed. So, we're on the top of page 43, and just know that you can pause anytime you want and read on your own. While we were hard-pressed in the war at Troy, he stayed safe inland in the grazing country, making light talk to win Agamemnon's queen. So while they were at Troy, Aegisthus was there, sweet-talking Queen Clytemnestra. But the lady Clytemnestra in the first days rebuffed him, being faithful still. Then, too, she had at hand as her companion a minstrel that Agamemnon left attending her, charged with her care when he took ship for Troy. So when he left, he had his minstrel over watching over Clytemnestra. Then came the fated hour when she gave in. Her lover tricked the poet and marooned him on a bare island for the seabirds' picking, and took her home as he and she desired. So it sounds like they both had this plan together. Many thigh bones he burned on the gods' altars, and many a woven and golden ornament hung to bedeck them in his satisfaction. He had not thought life held such glory for him. He was super excited to now have Clytemnestra all to himself. Now Menelaus and I sailed home together on friendly terms from Troy, but when we came off Sunian Point in Attica, the ship still running free, Onotor's son, Phrontis, the steersman of Menelaus' ship, fell over with a death grip on the tiller. Some unseen arrow from Apollo hit him. Remember how I said they never just say, oh, he died of a heart attack. It's always Apollo shooting an arrow. No man handled a ship better than he did in high wind and sea. So Menelaus put down his longing to get on, and landed to give this man full honor and funeral. His own luck turned then. Out on the wine-dark sea, in the murmuring hulls again, he made Cape Malea. But Zeus, who views the wide world, sent a gloom over the ocean, and a howling gale came on with seas, increasing mountainous, parting the ships, and driving half toward Crete, where the Kydonians live, by Iardanus' river. Off Gorton's coastline in the misty sea there, a reef, a razorback, cuts through the water, and every westerly piles up a pounding surf along the left side, going toward Phaestus. Big seas buffeted back by the narrow stone. They were blown here and fought in vain for sea room. The ships kept going in to their destruction, slammed on the reef. The crews were saved, but now those 5 that weathered it got off to southward, taken by wind and current on to Egypt, and there Menelaus stayed. He made a fortune in sea traffic among those distant races, but while he did so, the foul crime was planned and carried out in Argos by Aegisthus, who ruled over golden Mycenae 7 years. So 7 years he was ruling while Agamemnon was gone. 7 long years with Agamemnon dead, he held the people down before the vengeance. I'm sorry, I take that back. 7 long years with Agamemnon dead. Okay, sorry. 7 long years with Agamemnon dead. Not while Agamemnon was gone, because he was still the king, but after Agamemnon was dead. Okay, so 7 years he ruled over Mycenae. But then Orestes killed the snake who killed his father. He gave his hateful mother and her soft man a tomb together, and proclaimed the funeral day a festal day for all the Argive people. That day Lord Menelaus of the great war cry made port with all the gold his ships could carry. And this should give you pause, my son. Don't stay too long away from home, leaving your treasure there and brazen suitors near. They'll squander all you have or take it from you, and then how will your journey serve? I urge you, though, to call on Menelaus, he being but lately home from distant parts in the wide world. A man could well despair of getting home at all if the winds blew him over the great South Sea, that weary waste. Even the wintering birds delay one winter more before the northward crossing. Well, take your ship and crew and go by water, or if you'd rather, go by land. Here are horses, a car, and my own sons for company as far as the ancient land of Lacedaemon, and Menelaus, the red-haired captain, there. Ask him with courtesy, and in his wisdom he will tell you history and no lies. So you can take your boat all the way around to the other side to Sparta and go inland that way. Or I'm going to give you a car, which back then was a chariot, and horses. While Nestor talked, the sun went down the sky, and gloom came on the land. And now the gray-eyed goddess Athena said, Sir, this is all most welcome and to the point, but why not slice the bulls' tongues now and mix libation for Poseidon and the gods? So why not offer that now? Then we can all retire. High time we did. The light is going under the dark world's rim. Better not linger at the sacred feast. When Zeus's daughter spoke, they turned to listen. And soon the squires brought water for their hands, while stewards filled the wine bowls and poured out a fresh cup full for every man. The company stood up to fling the tongues and a shower of wine over the flames, then drank their thirst away. Now finally Telemachus and Athena bestirred themselves, turning away to the ship. But Nestor put a hand on each and said, Now Zeus forbid, and the other gods as well, that you should spend the night on board, and leave me as though I were some pauper without a stitch, no blankets in his house, no piles of rugs, no sleeping soft for house or guest. Far from it, I have all these blankets and deep-piled rugs, and while I live, the only son of Odysseus will never make his bed on a ship's deck. No, not while sons of mine are left at home to welcome any guest who comes to us. Okay, again, that beautiful culture of Xenia, of hospitality. There's no way he's going to let his guests sleep on a ship deck. The gray-eyed goddess Athena answered him, You are very kind, sir, and Telemachus should do as you ask. That is the best thing. He will go with you, and will spend the night under your roof. But I must join our ship and talk to the crew to keep their spirits up, since I'm the only senior in the company. The rest are boys who shipped for friendship's sake. No older than Telemachus, any of them. Let me sleep out then, by the black hull's side this night at least. At daybreak I'll be off to see the Cauconians about a debt they owe me, an old one and no trifle. As for your guest, send him off in a car, a chariot, with one of your sons, and give him thoroughbreds, a racing team. Even as she spoke, Athena left them, seeming a sea hawk in a clap of wings, and all the Achaeans of Pylos town